Good evening, everybody. This is Kevin Ring. I'm president of FAM. I could not be more excited to be here tonight with you all. It's the coming together of three great groups dedicated to fighting for reform in Florida. This is the first of a two-part Florida Empowerment Summit, and I'm joined, FAM is joined by Florida Cares and Florida Rights Restoration Coalition. And our goal is to marshal the energy that everybody has showed, both doing legislative advocacy, at the ballot measures, taking all the good work that's being done, and shift our field of vision to the fall and the election. Because what we want to make sure is that that energy and activism is turned to making informed voters, because that will help us get to the outcomes we want. You know, FAM has been around for 29 years. We've been in Florida for over a decade. And our focus has been in elevating the voices of those who've been directly impacted by broken sentencing and prison laws. And we want to make sure that those people have a seat at the table, those voices are heard, and that the harm and the damage that is caused to people who have loved ones in prison, that those stories and experiences matter to lawmakers. And we've joined recently with Florida Cares, who is another family focused group. And we're so happy to partner with Florida Rights Restoration Coalition on this and other events, because they also are raising the voice of the directly impacted people. And we think that together we can create an army that people will have to listen to. We've had some success in the past. We've been able to change laws related to aggravated assault and the 1020 life sentencing law. There have been some changes to drug trafficking laws. But I think everybody came away from this last legislative session with a sense that we haven't got enough, that we need more change and we need it faster. And now we're at a time where there's a deadly virus sweeping through state prisons. And there's a moment in our country is dealing with centuries of racial inequity. And so there's a huge moment and an opportunity to be seized here. And that's what we want to do. One thing I'm going to ask everybody to do, our three groups came together. And this, like I said, this is the first part of a two-part summit. We want to collect your voices and your energy into one force that we can use come this fall. And so we're going to repeat a number of times throughout this broadcast to take out your phones, if you will, and text Florida to 21333. That's Florida to 21333. And if you do that, you'll start getting information about the step 2 of this Empowerment Summit. So you can join us and we'll start getting more information as we head into the fall. One thing that we hear a lot as we finish these legislative sessions is people saying, these folks don't listen to us. They don't care about us. All they care about is getting reelected. And our view is that that is an outstanding opportunity for us, because if they want to get reelected, they need us. And together, if we unify our voices and we come together, we can make a difference. And I know it's easy for people to think, that getting change is too hard. I just want to say one experience at the federal level that FAM has been working, there for a couple decades. Over the past 7 years, the federal prison population has been cut by more than 50,000 people. Okay, we have a lot more work to do, but that was the product of policy changes made. Both executive clemency, sentencing guidelines were changed, laws were changed like the First Step Act and the Fair Sentencing Act. So deliberate policy changes were made and we are seeing results. And there's no reason why Florida can't do the same. And so I'm so grateful that we are coming here together. This is the start of a process, and we're dying to work together and work with you to get active. And so with that, I want to thank again Florida Rights Restoration Coalition for pulling this together. And I want to introduce FAM's incredibly valued partner, the hardest working person we know, and that's Denise Rock, who's the head of Florida Cares.
Hi. Thank you, Kevin. I am Denise Rock with Florida Cares. We are dedicated to improving the lives of the incarcerated. We originally started this just a few years ago. It was me and a couple other girls that started quietly in the visitors park of a local prison talking, and our our common ground was built on visitation and meeting so many people through visits. And I think through that, just learning to connect with one another. And we have all done such a wonderful job in being able to come together and raise our voices. And I think that it is time for us to connect with Desmond and FRRC. And thank goodness that we have been able to be with FAM and to have the comfort of being there with them, to come together and learn more about the legislative process and begin to direct our energy where it needs to go. And I think that, you know, we do feel like, having been so quiet in those visitor parks and having to keep our voice so quiet, it is hard to use it. So being able to learn to do that here, and seeing the change is slow, but we know that it is possible and that we do see it happening. And, you know, for the first time 2 years ago, we saw that we could stand up respectfully, and we stood up respectfully, and we were able to hold on to our visits, and we were able to keep our visits the same. And, you know, since then, we've been able to keep many people connected to their loved ones. We've been able to keep transfers from happening, and we've been able to help advocate for our incarcerated loved ones and seek to help now reduce our prison population together with these two organizations. So we're just so happy to be here, and happy to be a part of this process and teach everybody some more. Desmond?
Denise, thank you. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm sitting here and I'm listening to Kevin, and while I was listening to Kevin, I was looking at Denise, right? And then it just dawned on me, right? How, you know, these two folks from two great organizations, and what do their names speak to this moment, right? So we know that Denise rocks, right? We know that Florida Care rocks, right? And then we know with Kevin, right? Kevin Ring, that we actually have an opportunity to ring in the new season, right? And that's how I'm looking at it, because listen, we see what's been going on for the past several months with the response to COVID-19, and how even elected officials are so slow, and they're still slow. I just received a notice today from an attorney where a gentleman at Zephyr Hills just passed away because of lack of medical attention in that facility. We see how they've been responding to us around COVID-19. And then we see the killing of Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, all just horrible news that has just been like oppressing us for most of this year, right? And it's so easy to get depressed. It's so easy to lose energy. It's so easy to be angry and to be fearful, right? And we're seeing how that is playing out in our streets. But listen, when I am looking at Kevin and I'm looking at Denise, right, what I'm thinking in my head, right, is that at the end of the day, that we may be witnessing what I consider the divine synchronization, right? That the events of this world, of this country, has been lining up in such a way, right, to create a moment for people like me and you, right? To create a moment for all of the members and leaders of FAM, and all of the members of leaders of Florida Care, and all of the members and leaders of Florida Rights Restoration, that this moment is being prepared for us. And as we may see in the news where there's protests and you see places burning and cars burning, and what rings in my head is, out of the despair of the ashes of protests can emerge a phoenix, right? Renewed, right? With hope and with vigor, right? And with power to actually change the conditions that we have been wanting to change for so long, right? Because now we see that a lot of the issues that we and our loved ones have cared about for so many years, it seems to always fall on deaf ears. And part of that was for two reasons. Number one, that the people that we were advocating for couldn't vote in the state of Florida. So why would politicians care about that, right? And then number two was that there was a narrative that said that people with felony convictions or people who have been impacted by the criminal injustice system do not deserve the amount of attention or do not deserve the compassion as everybody else. And we've seen how our cries, how long have we been talking about the powers of a DA? How long have we been talking about the powers of a sheriff? When we see the whole world conversion and uprising and protest, they're finally getting our message that in spite of whatever you may have charged us with, in spite of whatever you may have convicted us with, that we're still human beings that deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. And how could it not be divine synchronization that we have the same issues that have ignited the passion of this country are issues that people like us are more intimately connected to? Who else knows better, right? Who else has an intimate experience with sheriffs and prosecutors and judges than people who have been through this system? I can tell you, I personally remember many years ago when I was arrested and how the police officer took his gun and he split the back of my skull after I was down on the ground. And then how his other fellow officers came with their combat boots and kicked me in the head repeatedly till I almost lost conscious. And how to justify that, they created a bogus charge saying, y'all know it, battery on a Leo. We know when we see that, we know that what it means is that the police would kick the heck out of somebody and they had to put a charge to cover it up. And so we know these things that this nation is uprising about. We know it intimately. We've been yearning for attention, and now we got the attention we've been crying for. And in addition to that, not only do we have their attention, but now we have the power. How could it be but nothing but divine synchronization that in the midst of all of this, a federal judge would all of a sudden say, guess what? Let's get rid of those fines and fees. That cost and fees are unconstitutional, clearing the way for approximately 900,000 returning citizens. How can we not see that this is our moment? How can we not see that this is the time? How can we not understand that this tonight right here, this moment to bring together FAM, to bring together Florida Cares, along with Florida Rights Restoration Coalition is nothing but the beginning of an uprising that would finally change the conditions that we've been yearning for. And it's all here. It's here. And it starts right here, right now, tonight. So let's rock, y'all.
All right. Awesome, Desmond. Denise, once again, Desmond's just mailing it in, isn't he? That was awesome. Hey, I just want to say, I didn't say this at the beginning. So the goal tonight is information. Telling people, like Desmond said, we want to take power, and we got to go where the power is. And so we're going to split this up in two ways. We're going to start with Greg and Denise from FAM and Florida Cares, talking about lawmakers, the power they have, what influences them, and how we can change that. And then Desmond and Neil are going to talk about sheriffs and state attorneys. And with that, we're going to cover the waterfront, and then we're going to come back in a week and a half and give you the tools that we need then to go execute a strategy for changing things, okay? So tonight is all about getting informed about what these actors do in the system and why they're important. And so now I want to kick it over. I think Denise is going to start for the legislative side.
Oh, sure, yeah. Well, I think for those of us that are directly impacted and have a loved one that's incarcerated, you know, a lot of us, the anger that we feel a lot is directed toward the Department of Corrections, you know, based on a lot of what Desmond shared a few minutes ago, and then also stretching on to how our loved ones have lost things over time and how they've lost programs and education and things to do in there, and how our system has increased the prices that we pay for things. And you know, they're always charging more for canteen, and the food is worse and stuff. But actually, what I want to share with you all is that it's really, it doesn't rest just with the Department of Corrections. It starts with our legislators, and we're responsible for that because we elect them, and either we elect them or we don't bother to go to the polls to make sure of who we're electing, and we need to change that. All right, and so we're going to start talking about that, and we're going to keep talking about that until we change it. Our legislators, they're the ones that are cutting the budget. They're cutting the money out of the budget. And so they're kind of strapping the Department of Corrections. So now the Department of Corrections has less money in their budget. So they're not going to cut out their security. So they're going to have to cut money out of programs. And they're going to have to cut money out of education. They're going to have to charge the highest commission that they can possibly charge for JPay and Securus and, you know, our canteen contracts, because that's where they're going to make their income, so that they can fund their place, so that they can pay themselves. So I'm not excusing the Department of Corrections, but our legislators put them in this position, and we need to put our legislators in the position where they need to make better decisions for us and for our loved ones. That's where we want to take our focus. You know, it used to be that because the Department of Corrections had money in their budget, that they had an officer that was inside the security room, and they had a sergeant that was outside on the floor. Now, because they've had budget cuts, there's just a TA, which isn't even an officer. This is someone with, you know, like less than a year of experience inside the bubble, and no officer in the dorm with our loved ones. This is a security risk to our loved ones, right? This is what leaves them, you know, unattended, at risk, and where trouble happens. And that happened because of budget cuts. Those budget cuts, those happen because of our legislators, okay? So when we get upset, that's who we need to be upset with. Our legislators, they put us in that position. I really do. I want us to back that up. I want us to think about that. I want us to get more involved with our legislators. I want us to call them, email them, find out about them. The internet is amazing. You can Google anything. All these candidates, you can Google every single one of them and find out what they're about, who they're related to. Relationships are super important. Think about your own relationships. So, you know, look at who their mothers are and their fathers are. You know, we have to start to take our lives in the direction that we want it to go. You know, we cannot sit here any longer and sit here with this shame or embarrassment that we have because our loved one is incarcerated. So what? Who cares? All right. Drive the car, get in there, turn the ignition on, and let's drive the car. Let's go somewhere. All right. Let's change our destiny. All right. Let's engage our legislators. Let's be where they're at. They're going to go to, they're holding a town hall. Show up at the town hall. You don't have to even tell them that your loved one's incarcerated. Just ask them a question. Do you believe in mandatory minimums, or do you trust a judge to sentence someone properly? There you go. You know, hold them accountable. Let's hear what they have to say in public. And let's engage the legislators, or the candidates. Let's find out what they're thinking, and let's get out there and let's start to see what's going on. I think that the three organizations are a great dynamic. You know, we're going to make sure that we're registered to vote with Desmond. You're going to come here to Florida Cares. We're going to find out who your legislators are, okay? And in the process, we're going to find out what districts you are, and if you're not registered to vote, scoot you over to Desmond so you can get yourself registered to vote. And Greg, you're going to tell us all these intricate stories about how our legislators work and what's really going on up there in Tallahassee?
Yeah. Thank you, Denise. My name's Greg Newbern. I'm the Florida director for FAM and have been since 2011. What an honor to be meeting with everybody tonight, and thank you everybody who's tuned in. This is a tremendously important issue and a tremendously important time to talk about it. I do want to talk a little bit about the legislative process, the legislature, and why it is that we are telling you that elections for the legislature are so important for this issue. As Denise said, of course, the legislature makes the budget for the Department of Corrections. When there's no money for drug rehabilitation because the legislature cut it, that's the legislature that cut it. When there's a 1020 life law that puts somebody in prison unnecessarily, that's because the legislature wrote a 1020 life law that did that. The legislature makes the crimes, they repeal the crimes, they make all the sentencing policies, they determine whether to make enhancements to reduce the sentences, to whether they make them retroactive. They determine the extent of prison conditions and whether they're improved. They determine things like reentry, some of the things that FRRC is focused on. It's the legislature that does that. And so they're not the entire ball of wax, but it's really close. And so it's vital that we understand what the legislature is, how it works, and why it's important that you vote for the right people to send to the legislature to make those decisions for everybody. So let's talk a little bit about the legislative process. And when we talk about why legislative elections are important, it's because, as Kevin mentioned at the beginning of this, the only thing that legislators care about is getting reelected. All right, or at least it's the most important thing to a member of the legislature, is being reelected. And the thing they care about most after that is positioning themselves to be elected to a higher office after they're done with this one. Representatives want to stay representatives, and then they want to become senators, or they want to become members of Congress. Senators want to stay senators, and they also want to become members of Congress, or they want to hold statewide office. Most of them want to be governor. They all want to be president. Everyone in Tallahassee pretends this isn't true. I don't know why they do it. Everyone pretends this isn't true, but it is true, and everybody knows it. That means that policy decisions, budget decisions, every decision that's made in Tallahassee is made primarily out of political ambition. It's not ideology, and it's not philosophy, and it sure as heck isn't principle. It's political ambition that is the primary motivation for all of these decisions. And I don't want this to mean that the legislators don't want to do the right thing. They are all trying to make Florida a better place to live. I know a lot of these legislators, they're overwhelmingly people of good faith. They're trying to do right by their constituents. But every policy decision made by nearly every legislator in Tallahassee is going to be motivated primarily by political ambition. If you remember that one lesson, then your time with us tonight will not have been ill spent. Political ambition motivates politicians. So why is that important to know? Because it's important to know that it is not enough to be right. And I know it's not enough to be right because I'm always right. So if being right were enough, then the legislature would have repealed mandatory minimums 10 years ago. And instead of being with you tonight, I'd be the happiest neighborhood donut shop owner in Gainesville, Florida, and none of you would ever see me again. But it isn't enough to be right. We have to be strong. And it isn't even enough to be strong. We've got to be stronger than the other side, okay? And what does it mean to be stronger than the other side? It means that the people who make decisions in Tallahassee have to be more afraid of us than they are of our opponents, all right? I want you to think of the legislative process as a tug of war. On one side, you've got FAM, FRRC, Florida Cares, and all of our partners in the criminal justice movement. We're pulling on the rope, trying to get the legislature to pass sentencing reform or improve prison conditions, improve reentry conditions, and so on. And on the other side, you've got the Florida Sheriff's Association, the Florida Police Chiefs Association, and the Florida Prosecuting Attorneys Association. Today, they're on the other side, and they're pulling on the same rope, trying to get the legislature not to do anything. or to make things worse. All right. And later, Neil and Desmond are going to talk about changing the culture in those associations and the importance of those offices on the process. But I'm just telling you what the dynamic is today. All right. We have to be more powerful if we want to win. And there are two kinds of power in the legislative process. The first is lobbying power. And I want to talk about that for a minute. It's hard to win a seat in the legislature. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of money. If you want to win a seat to the House, you have to raise $150,000, $250,000 easy. To get into the Senate, it takes $500,000 to $1 million. And for a competitive race, it's easily much more than that. So to raise the money to run an effective campaign, candidates go to lobbyists. And lobbyists are people who represent clients, businesses, professional associations, nonprofits, and so on in front of the legislature. So the lobbyists call their clients, and their clients write checks to candidates' campaigns. And then the lobbyists host fundraisers for candidates, and they write their own checks to the candidates. And what happens is, by giving money to candidates, the lobbyists buy access to them after the candidates win and become legislators. So the financial support in the campaigns becomes influence in the legislature. For example, the Florida Sheriff's Association pays 5 different lobbyist firms over 6 figures. The Police Chiefs Association pays 3 more lobbyist firms. These are the same people who give hundreds of thousands of dollars to candidates while they're running for office. So imagine it's legislative session. We go to the legislators, we tell your stories, we show them the evidence, we show them the data, we show that we are right and they are wrong, and you call their offices and you drive to Tallahassee and you rally and you meet with the members, and then the sheriffs see all of that. So what do? They call up one of their dozens of lobbyists. And when you're on I-10 East heading home after your day in Tallahassee, that lobbyist puts on the alligator shoes and they walk over to the governor's club, and then they see the chairman of the committee, they light a cigar, they pour a whiskey, and they see the committee chair and they say, "Hey, chair, remember when my firm bundled $100,000 for your political committee last year? My client would really like for that sentencing reform bill not to be heard." And guess what happens next? If you guessed, ding dong, the bill is dead, move to the head of the class, because that's exactly what happens. So when it comes to lobbying power, we're really outgunned. Most of the organizations in this space, we don't write checks to candidates. They aren't represented by lobbyists. FAM is an exception to some of these things. But even when we do, we don't have the kind of resources that the other side does. We're not going to win with lobbying power, so we have to have another kind of power. That's people power. I told you that every policy decision is made by political ambition. What that means is that every decision a politician makes is made with an eye toward whether it will help them or hurt them in the next election. There's a reason that sheriffs give awards to the legislative champions and friends of the sheriff every year. There's a reason they walk around the Capitol scaring legislators into thinking that they're going to call them soft on crime in the next election, in the next campaign. Now, and it doesn't matter that the sheriffs can't actually deliver votes, right? If they could, we might have Governor Putnam, but we don't. It doesn't matter that they can't actually deliver on these things. For whatever reason, there is a perception that crossing the sheriffs will be politically costly, but crossing us won't. And we have got to change that. If we're going to win, we have to create an environment in Tallahassee where opposition to sentencing reform, prison reform, reentry reform is a political nightmare. Right now, there are a lot of legislators who will vote with us. They'll vote for sentencing reform and prison reform. They are persuaded, as they should be, that we are right on the merits. They believe this aligns with their underlying principles. The problem is nobody fears the consequence of voting against us. They're okay with voting for us. None of them thinks they'll be hurt if they vote against us. So a lot of them have told me as much. So if we're going to win, we have to show them that we are for real. That means rewarding the people who are with us and punishing mercilessly the people who are against us. And I won't pretend this is easy, but it is not impossible. It is going to take commitment, dedication, energy. It means showing up, doing the work, and then showing up and doing the work again, and then doing it again. It means registering to vote, then registering 5 of your friends, and then 5 of their friends. It means telling your stories and then telling them again. It means finding our champions and then waving signs for them on the corner, knocking on doors in their campaigns, stuffing the envelopes in their offices for the people who do the right thing. And it means voting only for the people who deserve it. So I want to make this very, very plain, and I'm sure I've gone over it. It's what I do. I go over my time because I get mad. But I do want to make this very, very plain. We cannot do the things we want to do in Tallahassee unless we come together like Voltron and work really hard to win. We cannot win unless we send a very loud, clear, and unambiguous message to the power brokers in Tallahassee that this movement, this strong, powerful movement of directly impacted people, will not be ignored or else. And as Desmond said, that begins tonight with everybody who's watching right now. It is vitally important to get involved in the legislative elections. It's also important to get involved in your sheriff's races, your state attorney races, and your judges' races. And Des and Neil are going to tell you why those are important right now.
Hey, let me just jump in for 1 second because there's a question, which is Neil, Greg and Denise, how do people know how they're members, if they're good or not? How can they know?
It's easy because we have a questionnaire coming up with 12 good questions that are 12 bills that any of you would really like if they passed. And we sent them out to candidates about 3 weeks ago. That period's closing tomorrow. And we're going to share those answers with you all. And like Greg said, many of them would vote with us. We've got over half of the people have responded. And most of those answers actually are favorable, so that you know. So it is encouraging. But we cannot just sit here and do nothing. We have to figure out how to get the people that would be with us in, and how to have the courage, and for how to have those people to have the courage to vote that way once they are in. Like Greg said, they're going to have to know that if they don't stick to that vote, they will be gone. They need to know that.
I would also just add, as Denise said, a lot of these guys are going to have town halls, virtual forums. They have email addresses. They have phone numbers. Just call them. If you live in the district, you're a voter. Call, email, reach out, show up to the town halls, ask the questions, note their answers. And if they're not the right answers, go to somebody else, right? And tell them that you're going to go to somebody else. They've got to know that you care about this, that it's an issue. It's a voting issue for you. Otherwise, they won't care. Desmond was exactly right. I mean, the reason that they don't take incarcerated people seriously is they can't vote, right? So,
Well, I just wanted to say, I just wanted to.
Well, that's changing.
And it doesn't all have to be combative either. The questionnaire, for example, sorry, I just got to get going. You got all these A personalities that have to talk first, right? Is the questionnaire, so if someone would vote favorably in favor of second look, for example, you can write that candidate and say, wow, thank you so much for saying that you would vote in favor of second look. That's really wonderful. And that would encourage that person along the way. Or if you show up at a town hall, say that, wow, I saw on the questionnaire that you said you would vote in favor of second look. I think that's awesome. Give them that positive encouragement in public as well.
I just wanted to say the short answer is that we're going to try to make this as easy as possible because of that questionnaire. So if you have questions about where your lawmaker stands, Florida Cares and FAM did send a questionnaire We've got, like she said, over 140 responses. So it should be one-stop shopping soon where you're going to know, and you won't have to dig it on your own. And with that, let's talk about sheriffs, state's attorneys, and over to Desmond and Neil.
Oh, Des, you are on mute.
There's no. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, man.
Wow. What do you think about that, man? I mean, listen, Greg was using two words that stuck out to me with Greg is mercilessly, right? And Voltron. I mean, he summoned Voltron into this conversation. And just, I mean, before we start on this, I just got to lay this out because between what Greg was saying, right, and Denise, listen, here's the deal. At the end of the day, I could tell everyone three words: do the math, right? Matter of fact, I wish you all could just say it with me one more time. Do the math, right? And what I mean by that is that we have over 85,000 returning citizens already registered, right? And we have the opportunity to register over 900,000 more returning citizens in the state of Florida. And when I say in the state of Florida, I'm talking about a state where the last governor's election was decided by 30,000 votes. The governor's election before that was 63,000. The one before that was about 62,500. We already cover the gap. We weren't included in those numbers before. And so moving on from right now further, anybody who wants to be a governor in the state of Florida have to come talk to us. They can't get around us. They can't avoid us anymore. They have to come and have a conversation with people who've been impacted by this system and their loved ones, period, point blank. And the only reason they don't do that is if you tell them they don't have to. And so the power is already in our hands. Thank God for Amendment 4. Thank God for the work that people have been doing across the state. But listen, let's not stop at the governor. We got congressional race, and Greg, please tell me if I'm wrong, where the election to decide what person was going to represent us in the Senate, in Congress, U.S. Congress, was decided by 16,000 votes. We got that many returning citizens in just one county alone. And so once again, if anybody wants to get to Washington, much less the governor's mansion, they have to come through our collaborative efforts. They got to come through our collaborative family. There's no way around it. And so one thing I know is that when you look at, and don't let me say presidentials because that's only 100,000 votes. And when you look at the difference between the Bush-Gore election, that was only 527 votes. And so we already covered that gap. And we have an opportunity to decide who gets in and who don't. And we need to make sure that people are aware of that. And guess what? Most of them are already. And that's why if you notice the type of ads that was being played during the Super Bowl, if any of you watch the Super Bowl, right, there were ads that were being played and it wasn't about the economy. It wasn't about immigration. It wasn't, about healthcare. It was about criminal justice reform. And it's a reason why that ad was played. And so it's the play is in our hands. The moment is now, and we don't have to beg for anything anymore. We could demand it, and we can back our demand up with exacting consequences on people who don't heed our voices. Go ahead, Neil.
Well, yeah, thanks,
That
Des.
all came from Greg. Greg did all that with this Voltron stuff, man.
Oh, and I got to tell you, all of a sudden, as somebody who had a felony conviction, 13 years ago, and just listening to Greg, listening to you, Des, and walking out these last couple months, here in Florida, here in the country. I mean, my emotions are up. You know, one thing I've really seen is whether it's in COVID or whether it's in criminal justice reform, what we have literally seen in front of our eyes is that who you vote for has life or death consequences.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And I feel like this is building to July 1st, where we're really going to unpack some tools and empower people, because that's at the end of the day, what we want to do is walk together empowered so that we go into the election season educated and ready to make change. But I'm feeling it, as I know from an FRC perspective, over the last couple months, we've been traveling to jails all over the state of Florida, delivering masks for public health purposes into the jails, so that the people who are there, whether they be inmates or whether they be officers, that they can have some public health. And we wanted to be proactive about it. And it led to real conversations with people who are our sheriffs. And you got to see the impact of who we vote for on our loved ones' lives. Right? I mean, I woke up this morning to news that there are 100 people who tested positive in Lake County, right? You have a 10% of the population in that jail who are now have been tested positive for COVID, right? So we see it everywhere we look, y'all. And what we want to do fundamentally with this conversation is take this energy that I feel, that I live with every day, that I know everyone who's watching has those same feelings. And we want to channel that pain, that anxiety, that feeling that we have for our loved ones who might be hurting right now. And we want to channel that in the right direction. Because like Desmond said, if you go through any of the elections in this state, right, our collaborative effort totally covers the gap. And we can have an impact on the policies that the elected officials, no matter where they sit, whatever color they are, red or blue or whatever, you know, wherever they are, we have the ability to define what it is that they're talking about.
You know, and Greg
talk about.
Yeah, Greg talked about like the different people on the other side, but one encouraging thing that we have is that those people on the other side, they're not bringing new people to the party. We're bringing 1.4 million.
That's right. And so what we'd like to dig into is that, you know, when we're in the community, when we're talking to anybody and somebody asks the simple question, well, why should I vote? I've seen Des answer this question more times than you know, I can count, right? It starts with, let's talk about your life experience. Let's talk about this idea that your life matters and that your family's life matters. Tell me who arrested you. Tell me who charged you. Tell me who sentenced you. Do you know that all those people are elected so that you actually get to decide who they are? Eyes wide open, right? And so we want to kind of unpack that a little bit by talking about the role of the sheriffs and the role of the state attorneys in this process. So Des, I don't know how you want to go back and forth, both of us. I like what Denise said. We all like to talk and get excited.
Yeah, let's hit
you want to go.
Yeah, let's hit that. Let's get to next slide. Do we have it? We don't? Okay.
There we go.
Oh, hey, listen, everybody know us by now. You know, we are a membership grassroots organization that is led by directly impacted people and returning citizens. That means that if you've ever been convicted of a felony offense, if you've ever been impacted by the justice system, if you even have a loved one who has been impacted by the justice system, then you family, right? You are family. And all we concerned about is making sure it's not about left, it's not about right. It's about what's right for us. And that's why we don't lean left, we don't lean right. We lean straight forward into issues that impact people with felony convictions, right? And their family members who have loved ones impacted by this injustice system. One of the things that I want to make clear on this call is that, and that's why I'm so appreciative of this collaboration with FAM and Florida Cares, right? Because we can't be everything to everybody. And it is a great feeling to have partners that specializes in areas that can lead the charge. And what we are, part of what we are is taking a line from Freddie, what's his name? Theodore Roosevelt, right? When he was president of the United States, one of his famous lines, Greg, was, speak softly and carry a big stick, right? And so what Florida Rights Restoration Coalition is doing is that we're creating that big stick, right? And we're going to make sure that we empower people throughout all of our communities throughout the state that if FAM or Florida Cares is having a conversation with an elected official and it seems like he's not hearing you, well, we'll bring that big stick and pop him upside the head real quick and he'll hear you then. And if he don't hear you, we get somebody else in there that will. All right. And so I see us as just that three-headed hydra. You know, it's not quite like Voltron, but we like Hydra, you know, that we're being able to attack the same issue from three different angles just to make sure that at the end of the day, what we care about is our loved ones. We cover the gap, right? And as long as we continue to build, long as we continue to educate our people, long as we continue to get our people registered to vote, right? And to get them educated about, you know, Denise talked about the voters guide or the questionnaires that's going out. Those are the kind of things that all of our members will find useful to help guide them in how to vote. And at the end of the day, she was right when she said at the end of the day, it's not about whether someone has a D or an R. It's about whether or not they really care about our issues and they're willing to be a champion for our issues. And we reward the people that are, and we make sure we punish. We don't give any passes because someone has a D next to their name. We definitely don't give no passes if they have an R next to their name, right? No one gets passes, right? They've got to have our interests at heart or we get rid of them. Look at that. We got all the numbers right there, you know. 74,000 votes. Come on, we covered. Somebody hit that other slide before I get too excited.
There we go.
Right. And so when we talk about state attorneys and sheriffs, like I said, this moment is like ripe for us, right? Give you an example. When Ahmaud Arbery was murdered, right? I don't know how many people realize that the state attorney, it was over 74 days before any charges was even filed. And that was because the state attorney was friends with the people that killed him. And the only reason that they charged him was because of the public outpour, outcry, I should say, right? That state attorney is elected, right? That state attorney has not only the power to stack charges up against us, but when something happened to our loved ones, they have the power to right that wrong. How many times we've seen where people are incarcerated and every bit of evidence showed that they were wrongfully convicted, and you would have that one state attorney that just don't want to give up. Mm-hmm. You know, and we've seen it in Just Mercy, where the state attorney knew that they had the wrong person, but for political reasons or whatever personal reasons, they wasn't seeking justice. They were seeking a scapegoat. And so these state attorneys have that type of power to either give us justice or to actually oppress us, you know, and so go ahead, Neil.
Yeah, and if I could add to that, Des, it would be like there is that role of the state attorney, and then there's also the role of the state attorney as a policymaker, as an advocate for policy. You know, we see that there are so many state attorney races all across the state right now. The state attorney race in Broward County, in the district in Broward County, and the state attorney race in Orange, up in the Gainesville area. All across the state, you see an ability to make a decision that could change not only the sentencing decisions, but also the policy decisions around criminal justice reform. You could see a district that could go from having thousands and thousands of people on probation to many less than that, to children being direct filed as adults to not being direct filed as adults. You could see an advocate go up to Tallahassee, like Denise and Kevin were talking about, who would say, I am the state attorney in this area. I am the top law enforcement officer. I'm using my voice to say we need to make changes, and good changes as opposed to bad changes.
Neil, when you think about, let's go back to COVID-19 for a second, right? One of the things that we knew and that we were fighting for, we was even telling the governor, we're like, yo, you got to do something, right, Mr. Governor? Because the last thing we want is to turn our jails and prisons into morgues, right? Because if you remember, like the people on cruise ships, it was like really deadly there because of the everyone was in close proximity of each other, and the governor didn't even want the cruise ships to land, to dock in the state of Florida, right? But every last one of our prisons and jails were like cruise ships, right? And we had a higher risk of actually getting COVID-19, a higher risk of actually dying for it. In one county, I think it was I can't remember the name of the county. Neil, you can help me out, but
Santa Ana, is that what Santa Rosa?
it was in it might have been Santa Rosa, right? To where a Blackwater prison,
Yep.
the people confined to Blackwater prison represented less than 1% of the population of Santa Rosa, but yet over 70% of the deaths, right, of Santa Rosa. And we were seeing people even in the county jails die. The reason why I say all that, because we had a lot of people, a lot of our loved ones was in risk of dying from COVID because they were in the county jail and they weren't even convicted of anything. Because of bail, you have people that's languishing because they're too poor, that they're subjected to being in this type of condition. The state attorney had the power to actually release them. The state attorney could say, you know what? We're not seeking bail. We want to release him on his own recognizance. The state attorney could do that. The state attorney could say, you know what? We're not going to prosecute at this time. We're going to nolo prosse this case, right? And we're going to let this person out. The state attorney's got that type of power. And so to me, I think that they're one of the most powerful people in the county because they're the only ones that really got the discretion on who they want to charge. They could charge the mayor. Could you imagine that the mayor knowing that the state attorney is investigating him? Man, that's a lot of power for a state attorney to have. And we need to make sure that people who have that type of power are justice-oriented people.
That's right. That's right.
That they're
This is the
using their
year.
power for the right reason.
Yes.
That they're using their power for the right reason, like we had last week or whatever, where we had the sheriff's officer who used who kept the protesters in jail overnight, and you know, he could have just given them a ticket thing. He didn't have to keep them in jail overnight, but he was trying to teach them a lesson.
And expose them to COVID-19.
Yeah, and that's not right. That's using your power inappropriately, and that type of leader we don't need.
Yeah, and it really is. I've heard Des say it. I say it all the time too. And you can see people, whether they're kind of with us or not, when you literally say, hey, that state attorney has the power of making the decisions that impact people's life or death. And we saw it with COVID. The veneer was just ripped away. And we collectively have the ability to make the decisions. We are the check. Right. And we need to engage. I mean, the idea of seeing the questions come up, knowing there's folks in every community here who want to get engaged and make the kind of change that we need. This is a great night.
Could I do the numbers once again, Neil?
Yes, please.
Right. Remember those 3 words, everybody. Do the math. Right. I'm going to give you a perfect example. Broward County have a state attorney, Mike Sachs, right? When he last ran for office, he won by around 5,000 votes, right? That year, over 88,000 registered voters in Broward County didn't even bother to vote, right? And then when you look at the data coming out of the 13th, not the 13th, but the Broward is the 17th Judicial Circuit, you would see that Broward County convicts an average of 14,500 people each year. 14,500. And right now, if you were to go, like we have a spot on our website that talk about returning citizens in different counties or registration opportunities, you know how many people right now in Broward County are eligible to be registered to vote? 181,000. And so when you talk about electing someone with that much power, right, to actually decide who to charge and who not to charge and who to let go and who not to let go and who to ask for a bond and a crazy bond and who to let go on their own recognizance, when you understand that that last election was decided by 5,000 votes, but there's 181,000 returning citizens that could be registered in that county, Can you question who has the power? Can you really doubt who has the juice? We cover the gap. We can make a difference.
Yeah, and so kind of the last piece of our presentation, I know we had questions, and I know we're trying to honor everybody's time, is just some basic information about the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition. We have been sharing the text number for our group, and we'll keep sharing that in the chat. But there's a very special group of people. If you are a returning citizen and you have not registered to vote, you have questions about registering to vote, like, we just ask you simply to text register to 82623. Like, every day, all over the state, constantly telling people, text register to 82623. Like, the ability to make these decisions rests on you taking that step, getting plugged in, coming back here on July 1st. With that being said, I will definitely kind of turn this back over to Kevin, or if there's any questions that anybody has. Appreciate the time.
I was gonna say, I mean, we've gone about an hour. The key for us is coming back. This was a chance to talk about why this matters. I think all of our orgs have been working on different issues, legislative, the ballot measures in the communities. I know Florida Rights has been handing out masks. They've been working the jails. I know that Florida Cares has been, doing jail protests, making sure that people got their loved ones safe from COVID. There's been so much activity. And I just also know there's so much frustration with the way the last legislative session ended. So we wanted to channel that and tell you there is a way to use that energy to do something good. And so one was bringing the three of us together because we have a unique voice, which is directly impacted people, both the people who serve time and their families. And their families, no doubt, serve time when you're loved
Right along with us.
And so bringing these voices together, we're now going to aim for the November and before primaries. But we want your help doing this. We got to grow an army. Everyone says, oh, the NRA, ARP. What Desmond said is right. There is a big enough army here if people vote on this issue. I wish everybody had a bumper sticker that just said, I care about criminal justice and I vote. That would scare the hell out of a lot of people. So we just have to do that. We have time. This is just a kickoff to let you know that our three groups are changing our gaze. We're not crying about what happened in the legislature. We're not crying about what's going on in the world. We're focused on the future. And we want you to get involved. You can text Florida to 21333. We're going to be in touch with you all about next steps. July 1st is going to be our next piece of this Empowerment Summit. And at that time, and I'm going to ask Desmond to close, that we want to give people actual tools. It's going to be about the things we're going to do to make change. We just wanted to make you aware of why these players are important, why these elections matter. But now we're going to talk about things that Denise and Greg alluded to, town hall meetings, showing up, forcing them to fill out questionnaires and take a stand on these issues. It's time to do those things. Greg, did you want to say something? You're on mute.
Yeah. And bring 5 friends on July.
That's what
All right,
bring 10
right.
friends. Bring 10 friends.
Don't just come back.
Bring
some
10
people with you.
Bring 10 to win. Bring 5 to stay alive and bring 10 to win.
Seriously,
Right.
we look at these participants. We know it's streaming. Bring somebody with you on the next call.
Let me tell you. So just to say again that we have, if you could text the word register to the number 82623, right? And you save that, right? And you can share it with your friends, with your families. If you do that, let me tell you what's going to happen. If you do that, folks are able to register to vote online, right? And we're able to keep an eye to make sure that the state don't mess with their registration, right? Or if they run into any issues, we are there to actually help anyone walk through step by step, every step of the way until they're registered to vote so they can have their voices heard. So people need to text register to the number 82623. But I want to leave you because here's the deal that we see a lot of passion and a lot of emotions and a lot of anger and fear, all kinds of stuff just pouring out for several months in this country. And then even when we think about, our loved ones who are behind bars, or our loved ones who've been impacted, or even ourselves who've been impacted by this injustice system, and we get angry at times, and we just want to just tear something up, or we want to lash out, but we don't know how, and we want to restrain ourselves, and even at these protests, it's hard for a returning citizen even go to the protest, because like one of our members said, that a lot of us can't stand another charge, right? But we have all this stuff bottled up in us. What do we do with it? Because if we keep it in it, we're just going to kill ourselves. We're going to wear ourselves down. And so I say that we take this energy and we direct it towards something positive, that you get with FAM and find out how you can work with them, or you get with Florida Cares and see how you can volunteer or help out. But you always got to also think that we've got to make sure that you are registered to vote, and anyone around you is registered to vote. And you take that same passion and that pain and all those emotions that have made you angry or have gotten you depressed, and you take it to the polls with you in August, and you take it to the polls with you in November. And I leave with this, because I can't think of a better word to leave you guys with. Kevin, I got to go to Eminem. I've got to go to Eminem. And the song, Google it if you want on YouTube, it's called Lose Yourself. And what he talks about, he says, look, if you ever had one shot or one opportunity to seize everything you've ever wanted in one moment, what would you do? Would you seize it? Would you capture it? Or would you just let it slip away? This is our moment. This is our opportunity. We have seen divine synchronization align the stars in our favor, and that all we have to do is step into our purpose as people who have experienced the pain, have experienced the crush, the heavy weight of an injustice system that has been tearing our families and communities apart under the guise of public safety, but really for profit. This is our moment. And we cannot let this opportunity slip away. So let's seize it. Let's seize this opportunity. We've been on the bench for over 150 years. Let's get off the bench. Let's get in this game, and let's score one for the team. Let's do this. We got this. We cover the gap. We got the juice. Let's rock. Isn't that right, Denise? Rock.
That's right. And this is our time, and now is the time. And you know what, Desmond, I totally identify with what you're saying. Our loved ones that have loved ones inside that are on visitors list will totally identify with how we're afraid to go to protests as well, because we're afraid of getting kicked off visitors lists, And so this is the place where we can use that energy, and we can use it right here, and we can get loud, okay? We can raise our voices decibels here, okay? And we can make progress right here, right now. Our elections are what, September, June, July, August, November, 5 months away. We can make a huge difference. We can change this direction here, right now, this election, okay? We can make a whole new makeup up there in Tallahassee. You can look totally different come January, okay? This is it. This is the time, people. We can do this.
All right.
Sorry, I gotta add something. Every little comment here on Facebook and Zoom and all that stuff that's happening, all that should be responded with a tweet to one of these legislators going out there. They all like to talk to each other out there. If you're doing one to me or one to Kevin or whatever, go out there and put one on there to those legislators. Reward the ones that are doing good, punish the ones that are doing bad, okay? Remember that. Thank you. I shut up.
No, that's good. We're going to leave it now. I'm going to pick up on something Des said. With that energy and anger, we say this to our group. Do one thing every day. Take one step towards it. Tweet at somebody who's good and thank them. Tweet at somebody who's bad and challenge them. Do one thing every day. Don't let it stay bottled up. Do something productive every day. Okay? Find another friend to get interested in this issue. You know, take a step every day. Don't kill yourself, but do one thing every day and we'll make a difference.
And register someone to vote.
On message. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Yes.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate y'all. Thank you.